Yes, I think this is a really excellent question, and one that companies should be thinking about before it happens, because it's all well and good. Kind of when you get hit by ransomware, you're probably panicking. So having a kind of war game plan of like, if this happens, what we're going to do, is really important. And also, it should be something that you test out. So I think the first thing that I would recommend is to find and isolate all affected machines that are on the network. So if all machines on the network have been affected, then I would also work to disconnect the whole network. So the reason why I suggest this is because it's like sometimes the threat actors, when they like leave the system, they will leave behind malware or they'll have a backdoor onto the system. So this is really important that you don't use a compromised system or network when you're communicating with your kind of insurance providers, the ransomware negotiators, anyone else that's kind of dealing with your case. So some victims have made this mistake, and then they've had a shock that the ransomware actors actually said, "Oh, thank you for this information. We now know how much you're willing to offer us." So it's really important just to it also helps with if you manage to catch the ransomware, the threat actors whilst they're working on it, you're able to kind of isolate the machines that they've been on, and kind of hopefully help make sure that they can't get access to the rest of the network. Maybe that's where you have your backups connected. So in that case, you might be able to save your backups if you don't have any other ones. And also, it's kind of important to be able to identify what kind of ransomware you were hit with, as this allows you to kind of know whether you should, if you end up having to negotiate with them, whether you'll be dealing with data loss if you don't have backups, for example, or your backups happen to be corrupted, or they're missing information, like maybe they haven't actually been running for months on end. But also, it's possible that you might actually be able to decrypt your files for free. So knowing what ransomware you're dealing with can be really good in that. And also, it can give you an idea of how the threat actor is actually able to get in access to your system. So you're able to take these machines once you've taken them offline and have a closer look and see, oh, okay, this is, I've looked at these logs, they weren't encrypted, so I saw that they were actually able to get in via RDP. I see a bunch of kind of communications or attempts to access the system, and then there was one that actually worked. So I think kind of, first of all, take affected machines offline, and then second of all, kind of work to figure out how the threat actors got in and what kind of ransomware you're dealing with, as it will kind of inform your strategy going forward in terms of recovery, and also how you might proceed if you happen to need to pay the criminals. Hopefully not, but in some cases, if your backups aren't working or you don't have backups, then it may be necessary for some companies.
Yeah, those are very important pieces. And that's interesting, too, that in some cases you might not have to pay the ransom if you can get it decrypted for free. So every scenario is not the same, and you need to be aware of what you're dealing with. Really important. Mason, can you talk through some of the hazards of being compromised, and are there things we take for granted until it's too late?
Sure. From a corporate point of view, what actually happens when you get compromised is, recovery is a project, and there's lots of practical stuff to consider. Sarah mentioned, taking that network offline and communicating with insurance and negotiators, but you might have reporting requirements. Talk to your DPO for GDPR, ISO standards, HIPAA if you've got these higher compliance requirements, and obviously the reputation impact on your business is a huge one. But fundamentally, the most important thing is that your organization has the capability to recover. I've worked with some enterprises that had a brain drain over a period of time and lost key capabilities in terms of how their IT systems were set up and worked. And I personally see that as a real risk factor. If you don't have the know-how to get everything back up and running, you will be paying in either time or money. And you've only got a certain amount of runway as a business where you can, be not making any income while your IT systems are down before it starts to, cause a significant existence risk to your business. So one thing I would say is figure out how long you can possibly be down for as a red line, and make sure you can recover from backups faster than that. Disaster recovery technologies, full disk imaging, and being able to virtual boot that full disk image as a VM in the cloud or in another data center are absolutely fantastic at reducing your RTOs, recovery time objectives here. And then the other thing is just how did they get in? What stops it from happening again? If ransomware is involved, you have to ask yourself some pretty deep questions. Often people will see paying the ransom as a really fast way to get things back online. And it is a really fast way to get things back online. But how did the threat get in? Aren't you just as vulnerable after paying it? And these 2 points really play off each other. If you're still running a Windows Server 2003 box that's vulnerable and old and business critical and no one knows how it works, and it gets hit by ransomware, there's just no good answers for you. Maybe you can restore from backup, but it's still going to be vulnerable afterwards. So a lot of this is preventative. You should be trying to keep your software up to date. You should have staff that know how to rebuild your infrastructure. You should have your antivirus, EDR, endpoint security, network segmentation, and so on.